All right, today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to dive deep into the mind of an elite exorcist whose greatest enemy is, well, herself. And we're going to use a pretty surprising philosophical lens to really understand the inner war of Risa Wakatsuki.
So, let's just jump right in. The central question here is fascinating. How does a master tactician, someone who's all about precision and control, solve a war that's being fought entirely inside her own head? We're talking about Risa Wakatsuki, an Inquisitor whose greatest weapon is also the source of her deepest, darkest shame.
Okay, so to really get a handle on Risa, you have to understand the world she lives in. We're talking about Neo-Edo, a place where the Geist Veil has collapsed, making supernatural threats an everyday thing. This world has a really strict spiritual purity hierarchy, which puts massive pressure on her to be perfect. So she's built this flawless professional mask, but as we're about to see, it's hiding a seriously raging internal war.
So on the outside, you see this picture of perfect control. She's the strict Inquisitor. But deep down, there's this incredibly impulsive nature that's constantly bubbling just beneath the surface, always threatening to shatter that perfect image she's worked so hard to build.
And what's so fascinating is how this whole internal battle is perfectly reflected in her powers. She has two totally distinct sets of abilities, and this is where you can really see her psychology in action.
And this right here breaks it all down. On one side, you've got what she calls her refined arts. This is where her pride comes from. Things like her keen eye and perfect mimicry. They're surgical, precise. On the other side, you've got the raw, chaotic power she absolutely despises, her elemental bombs.
So you see the problem, right? One set of powers makes her feel like a genius, a true master tactician. The other just confirms her deepest fear, that she's a failure. Every single time she's forced to use that explosive power, it's a gut-wrenching admission that her precious, refined skills just weren't good enough.
And this conflict isn't just a one-time thing. It feeds into this vicious, self-defeating cycle. It's like a psychological trap she's constantly setting for herself, again and again.
It's basically a four-step nightmare that just keeps repeating. First, her impulsiveness kicks in and she rushes into danger. That, of course, leads to her getting cornered and overwhelmed. Then, she's forced to rely on the crude powers she hates just to survive. And with every explosion, that feeling of self-loathing just gets stronger and stronger. The screws just keep tightening.
But it gets worse. A lot worse. Because using that raw power she hates, it comes with a price. A really dangerous price called spirit heat. This is where the true horror of her situation really starts to sink in.
And what happens if that spirit heat builds up too much? We're talking about soul detonation. Yeah, her soul literally explodes from the inside out. And the most terrifying irony of all, she's hunting a killer who leaves victims in this exact state. So every case is a horrifying mirror reflecting her own potential fate.
So you can see how this seems like an impossible trap, right? No amount of sheer willpower is going to fix this. And that's where things get really interesting, because the solution might actually come from philosophy, from Arthur Schopenhauer of all people.
Okay, stick with me here. First up is this idea called the world as representation. Basically, Schopenhauer is saying that everything Risa values, her identity as a master tactician, her status, her pride, it's all just a story she tells herself. It's a construct, an illusion. So if all that is an illusion, what's real? According to Schopenhauer, what's real is the world as will. This is the raw, chaotic, irrational force that's underneath everything. And those explosive powers she hates? Well, you could say they're the most honest expression of that fundamental, chaotic reality. And once you see it that way, everything changes. Her pride isn't about skill, it's about being attached to an illusion. Her shame, that's just a byproduct of that attachment. And her explosive power, that's not a failure at all. It's the truth peeking through. Okay, so that's the theory, but how does this philosophical shift actually play out in her story? For that, we have to go to the climax, which takes place, very fittingly, in the Forbidden Forest. The situation is an absolute mess. Risa's getting hit from all sides. She's been betrayed by her own students, and at the same time, this incredibly powerful primal guy shows up and starts attacking everyone. It's total chaos. But here's the thing, Risa isn't seeing this as a simple good versus evil fight anymore. Through this new Schopenhauerian lens, she just sees the will, this blind, universal, chaotic force just devouring itself. And in that moment, something inside her just clicks. She makes a decision. And you can see it in her expression. It's not anger, it's not revenge,
It's this cold, resigned, almost detached look.
So what does she do? She completely lets go of all those refined tactical skills she was so proud of. She fully embraces that raw, volatile power and unleashes one final massive spirit heat explosion. It just vaporizes everything, the Geist, the traitors, all of it.
And this is so important. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't about passion. It was a philosophical act. She was basically quieting the will, imposing a final stillness onto all that chaos. In that moment, her fall of pride is complete because she finally accepts that raw, terrifying part of herself as a necessary tool.
So Risa's whole journey leaves us with a pretty heavy question. Is true strength really found in having perfect control? Or is it found in the courage to finally accept our own inner chaos? Something to think about.